Welcome back. Recall from the last video that King James signed a charter, which was a legal document telling the Virginia Company of London that their purpose in going to the New World was to find natural resources and create new trade routes for England. It also stated that they were to claim 100 miles inland and 50 miles to the north and south of their chosen settlement. And it allowed them to keep all their rights and status as English citizens while they were living thousands of miles away. In this video, we are going to be exploring the settling of Jamestown. And by the end, you should have the information to answer the following learning targets. I can explain why the colonists chose to settle on the land that they named Jamestown. I can describe the many challenges that the colonists faced which threatened their survival. And lastly, I can explain the changes that were made which allowed the Jamestown settlement to ultimately survive. First of all, we have to understand why Jamestown was chosen. We already know that the Virginia Company of London was working on behalf of the king, who wanted to expand England's wealth, resources, and power as it competed with France and Spain. We also already know that the Virginia Company of London was made up of wealthy investors who wanted to make money for themselves. These are reasons why they came to the Americas, and is not to be confused with why they chose Jamestown specifically when they had all of North and South America to choose from. Really, it came down to three specific qualities they were looking for. The land on which Jamestown sat looked like it would check off all those boxes. The land was a peninsula, which means that it was surrounded on three sides by water, including the Chesapeake Bay, which was plenty deep enough for their ships. This also provided adequate protection from Spanish attack. The peninsula was connected to the mainland by just a narrow strip of land, which would also make it easier to defend from attack by the natives. And most importantly, the land was bountiful with natural resources: timber for building, fruits and fish for food, and iron and ore for making pots and weapons. So now it was time to settle in and build their town. They would need many houses, a fence around the perimeter tall enough to prevent an attack by the natives, and a church, because we know that religion was important to them. First, though, we must think about who came over on those first three ships. More accurately, we need to think about what type of people. It was mostly wealthy men who were there to make more money for themselves. They were not used to performing manual labor like farming or construction, and they didn't want to do the work. Despite a lack of skilled labor and reluctance of the wealthy people to work, the colonists were able to build their fort in those first few months. But as quickly as the season changed from spring to summer, so too did their luck. In the summer heat and being so close to so much water, mosquitoes that carried local diseases swarmed, and marshy soil made planting difficult for the colonists. And the food they could manage to catch or grow began to rot without the benefit of modern refrigeration. In addition, salt water from the ocean was flowing into the freshwater sources, which made them undrinkable. There's a reason we don't drink ocean water. The salt soaks up water and dehydrates us. Hunger arose, the water grew foul, and diseases spread throughout the colony. By September, only 4 months after their arrival, almost half of the colonists had died. Soon after their arrival, Captain John Smith had been captured by the Powhatan tribe. Chief Powhatan knew he was a leader among the people invading their land, so he attempted to build a relationship with Smith in order to get him to join their tribe. During that time with the Powhatan Indians, Smith made friends and began to learn the Algonquian language. When he arrived back in Jamestown, he found the colonists dying and the fort near ruin. In order to save the colony, Smith took charge and implemented a harsh no work, no food policy. This meant that the wealthy colonists who didn't want to work would not be fed if they chose to be lazy. He also began an important trade relationship with the Powhatans. In exchange for copper and metal kettles, the natives provided food and introduced the colonists to tobacco. In 1609, unfortunately, John Smith was badly burned by a gunfire explosion and had to return to England. But for a while, the colony was very successful. However, in their eagerness to begin making money, the colonists failed to store enough food for winter. Adding to the burden of how many people needed to be fed, 400 new settlers arrived just before the winter of 1609. That season, colonists ran out of food, forcing them to eat their horses and sometimes even their leather belts and shoes. As people died, their houses were chopped up to provide firewood for the surviving colonists. By the end of the winter, the remaining colonists decided it was time to give up and head back to England. As they were heading back to the shoreline to load up their boats, they caught glimpse of an amazing sight. A ship was arriving with food, supplies, and 150 more colonists. With these vital resources arriving, the colony was able to come back to life. In John Smith's absence, Thomas Dale arrived in 1611 with military reinforcements to help protect the colony from the natives. He was also more harsh than Smith, giving each colonist a 3-acre plot of land where they had to figure out what to grow or they would risk starving. To further improve the relationship between the colonists and natives, John Rolfe married Pocahontas in 1614. Against all odds, Jamestown barely survived its first 7 years. There were, however, still more obstacles to becoming a permanent settlement. We'll explore that in the next video. All right, let's stop and self-reflect. What were 3 reasons the colonists chose Jamestown as their settlement location? Second, what were 3 challenges the colonists faced when they arrived at Jamestown? If you can answer these 2 questions, you are ready to move on. If you are having trouble with either of them, take a moment to review the video and come back to these questions.